And we know that he hit Avaros and Sentry.
There you are.
Ah, there's the Blighted Caretaker. Yeah, I mean this is definitely sketchy. Our opponent got a pretty good turn here. Hey everyone, Raptor Spank here. Today we have another episode of On the Grind, the show where I cover a deck I'm playing in Ranked. I'll break down the deck as well as a couple of flex spots. Then we'll put the deck through some matches and review how we do afterwards. This episode we'll be playing BT Aggro, a deck revolving around extremely aggressive Bilgewater and Targon creatures. Let's start with the champion package. This starts with 3 copies of Misfortune, a 3-cost 3/3. When allies attack, deal 1 to all battling enemies and the enemy nexus. Level up, I've seen you attack 4 times, then she becomes a 4/4 with Overwhelm, and instead of dealing 1 damage once, she deals 1 damage 3 times to all battling enemies and the enemy nexus. Her champion spell is Make It Rain, a 2-cost fast spell, deal 1 3 times among different randomly targeted enemies and the enemy nexus. This is the deck's all-star card. Essentially, it's extremely aggressive, forces damage through, and establishes really poor blocks for our opponent, and a flipped Misfortune can kill our opponents extraordinarily quickly. With dealing 3 damage to all enemies and the Nexus, and the fact that she has Overwhelm on top of that, that means basically nothing will be able to block her, and she'll still do the full amount of damage through, and just anything they do block will probably die, especially if it somehow survives her trigger, it'll die to the creature itself. And on top of that, Make It Rain is actually just great for a deck for either Plunder or Nightfall because it's low cost and it often ends up hitting your opponent's Nexus. Even if you can't guarantee it once they have 3 units on the board, it is still pretty reliable for hitting Plunder, and at the very least it can trigger Nightfall pretty easily. Next up, we have 3 copies of Gangplank, a 5-cost 5/5 with Overwhelm. When you summon him, he summons a Powder Keg, and then he levels up once you've damaged the enemy nexus in 5 different rounds, and then he becomes a 6/6, and then every round start he summons a Powder Keg, and whenever he attacks he deals 1 to all enemies and the enemy nexus. His champion spell is Parlay, a 1-cost slow that deals 1 to anything. If that target dies, it deals 1 to the enemy nexus. This is our primary finisher, since he should level up pretty quickly, since he doesn't actually have to see you deal damage. It's just once you've dealt damage in 5 different turns, and our deck is extraordinarily good at doing that. So he levels up pretty easily, and then that means you'll get the attack trigger off him, which should clear away blockers and blast the opponent's nexus pretty heavily in a similar way to Misfortune. And it'll almost always do more than 1 damage, because you'll almost always have a Powder Keg out, unless your opponent has found some way to kill it, since you'll be getting 1 every round, and sometimes that'll even mean that you'll have multiple Powder Kegs out, and his trigger will do as much as 3 to 4 damage, which should wipe your opponent's board pretty heavily and deal substantial damage to their Nexus. So this makes him basically our penultimate finisher, if you want to call it that. But next, let's look at the follower package. This starts with 3 copies of Jagged Butcher, the 1-cost 2/2. Plunder, grant me +1/+1. This is a great cost to value, since it's essentially a 1-cost 3/3. Sometimes it'll be a 2/2, but often we can make it a 3/3 using a variety of different cards in our deck. And so it's just great cost to value, and it's just super aggressive, since this can come down as early as turn 1. And you shouldn't be afraid to play this without Plunder, because the goal of the deck is speed. We just want to run our opponent down, so if we are playing this right away for a 2/2 or whatever without any way to trigger it, that's fine. We just need to get our clock going super quick with this deck. Next up, we have 2 copies of Lunari Dustbringer, a 1-cost 2/1. When summoned, create a Dusk Petal Dust in hand. This is our weakest 1-cost since it only has 1 health, but it still has 2 power, so it is pretty aggressive and helps get our deck to where we want to be. And it's a great Nightfall enabler, since Dust is a 1-cost burst spell that reduces the cost of the next Nightfall creature by 1, so you can play that and then play your Nightfall creatures on curve, the curve we already expect them to come down on. So it's good for that part in the deck, so that's the primary reason we have it, but in addition it is just 1 more creature with 2 power on turn 1, which our deck pretty much wants to have that every single game. Next up is 3 copies of Solari Soldier, a 1-cost 2/2. Daybreak, give me +1/+1 this round. This is another 1-cost 3/3, so we can get off to the races very quickly on turn 1 if we have this or a Jagged Butcher with a way to trigger Plunder. And since it's Daybreak, that's pretty easy for us to achieve throughout the game. We're fine playing this first in pretty much any situation. There's some where you're a little more hesitant about it, but generally speaking, you should be fine being able to play this for Daybreak any turn you play it. And chump blocks can be pretty irrelevant since we're going to lose the +1/+1 anyways, so swinging into something like a hapless aristocrat is fine because it won't actually do lasting damage to this unit. And that kind of discourages your opponent from blocking, so often you can get through with the full 3 damage anyways. And you can also play to discourage fearsome attacks. It's really good when an opponent goes, say, turn 2 Elise, and then you play this, because then they really don't want to swing in, because you'll just block and kill it. And if they wait, then it's going to lose the buff, and they could possibly make it through on the next attack. And since we're an aggro deck, if all we do is buy ourselves one more turn, that's often all we need to actually close out the game, or just get things into our favor for tempo. Then we have 3 copies of Lunari Shadestalker, a 2-cost 2/3. Nightfall, grant me elusive. This is just a cheap, hard to block and hard to kill unit that just really does everything our deck wants. It's only 2 mana for 2 power that can essentially have elusive, so our opponent usually can't deal with it. That's really good. That's what we want, and it's pretty easy to achieve Nightfall in our deck. We have a number of different cards to help it, like the Duskpell Dust we mentioned, so that shouldn't be too hard. That said, if we can't trigger Nightfall for it, it's pretty worthless, or not really worthless, but it's not worth much, since a 2/3 with no stats or no keywords is pretty bad. We don't want to do it, so the problem is that we generally speaking don't want to play this card unless we have some way to trigger Nightfall, and that can set up some poor tempo plays for us. But, that said, its payoff is pretty high since it can trigger Plunder or GP pretty easily due to the fact that it's elusive and probably can't be blocked. Next up, we have 3 copies of Solari Shieldbearer, a 2-cost 3/2. Daybreak, give me +0/+4 this round. This is really high power for a low cost. It's 2 mana, 3 power, that's great. And it can essentially attack for free on the first turn it comes down, since it gets so much health that pretty much anything that can block it won't actually do lasting damage to it, and so your opponent often won't block it. It's also great playing on defense, since you can block that turn and still probably attack with it the next one, and you could block Fearsome with it, so it can block extremely relevant units like Nocturne and Nocturne units. So it's a pretty strong 2-drop for the deck, just something that curves out well and can be useful at a lot of different stages in the game. Then we have 3 copies of Crescent Guardian, a 3-cost 3/3 with Overwhelm, and Nightfall, grant me +2/+0. This pushes a lot of damage through at a pretty low cost, since it's only 3 mana for 5 power, and it has Overwhelm, so you can't chump block it. Problem being, it kind of needs Nightfall, or else the damage is low enough to be absorbed. I mean, a 3/3 with Overwhelm doesn't do a ton, since a lot of things can block it and prevent the damage from coming through. So you kind of have to have Nightfall so it has enough damage that can keep pushing it through most units. So that's kind of a downside. Another downside is that it dies pretty easily with only 3 health. But since we're an aggro deck, we're hoping our opponent is dead before the time that becomes relevant. Then we have 3 copies of Petty Officer, a 3-cost 3/2. When you play it, summon a Powder Keg or a random 1-cost follower. This is a really go-wide aggro card that's great, and it comes down fairly quick. It builds up a wide board, so even if we have to be a little more defensive and block, we'll still be getting 2 units out of this, so we can block with 1 and save the other one. And it can always randomly grab some crazy good 1-costs that we wouldn't normally have access to, like Cythria, for example, or Navori Blade Scout on the attack can be incredible. So there's a lot of really good things this can grab for us. Fleet Feather Tracker is also great since we're running Misfortune. And then there's just some random points when you'll want to summon a keg just to either boost your Misfortune trigger or boost a Make It Rain, a Parlay, etc. There's a lot of reasons you might want to go with Powder Keg. Generally speaking, we're going to be going wide with this card and summoning a 1-cost follower, but there's a number of times where Powder Keg's actually a really strong play. And the fact that Petty Officer himself is a 3/2 means we can use him to block Fearsome. So against some of the scarier aggro matchups like Nightfall aggro, he can always just be a blocker to buy us time. So he's just an all-around great 3-cost for our deck. Next up is 3 Island Navigators, the 4-cost 2/4 with Scout. When summoned, summon a random 1-cost follower and grant it Scout. This is another go-wide card just like the Petty Officer, but it gives it Scout, so both the Navigator and the follower it summons can attack twice per turn. This is extremely relevant because it levels up Misfortune very quickly. Since now we'll be attacking twice per turn, that just means we need 2 turns and Misfortune has leveled up. If we have attack token on turn 2, for example, this is extraordinarily good because we can level up Misfortune as early as turn 6. So this card just really enables everything we're looking to do, and also builds up a board presence, and has 4 health, so it can block and attack, or can attack into some scary blockers like, say, a Petty Officer that's a 3-2. It can then attack into that, because it won't die, but the Petty Officer will. So it's just a pretty good body that just facilitates everything we're looking to do with this deck. Then we have 2 copies of Yordle Grifter, the 4-cost 3-3. When summoned, create a warning shot in hand, and Allegiance nab 1. It's a good body that can block Fearsome, and more importantly, this warning shot is really what we want because we get a good body that's aggressive, but we also get warning shot, which is a great way to trigger Nightfall, it's a great way to trigger Plunder, it's a great way to level up GP, it just does everything we want in our deck, so it's just another way to create a value card like that while also still having a body put onto the board. Then we have our final unit, 3 copies of Riptide Rex, an 8-cost 7-4, plunder, cast Cannon Barrage 7 times on randomly targeted enemies. This is a great payoff and one of our big game closers. Along with GP, we can always curve into a Riptide Rex instead, use a warning shot from Yordle Grifter or just from our hand to trigger him, drop him. He can board wipe against other aggro decks or sometimes even against mid-range decks. He's a sizable body on his own as a 7-4, so if our opponent plays out their hand and then we play this and it just wipes the board, we go into our turn, we can swing this, it'll do a ton of damage. We should be able to close out the game from that if our opponent doesn't have any blockers left, and even if they do, then they have to lose their blockers to Riptide Rex. It's just a pretty great payoff card for our deck. Now let's look at the spell package. This starts with 2 copies of Warning Shot, a 0-cost burst spell, deal 1 to the enemy nexus. This is an all-around great card because of what it triggers for a deck. It's good for Plunder, it's good for Nightfall, it's good for GP, and all of that. It's 0 mana at burst speed. It can set up an amazing turn 1 where we go Warning Shot, Jagged Butcher, hit our opponent for another 3. That's a total of 4 damage, all on round 1. It's just a great way for our deck to run our opponent down super quick. Then we have 3 copies of Make It Rain, a 2-cost fast spell, deal 1 3 times among different random enemies / the enemy nexus. This is just great removal for chump blockers, so we can force our damage through, and it establishes even better Misfortune attacks because things that have 2 health now get hit with Make It Rain, and then the Misfortune trigger will just clear them off the board, so even they can't block. And it can also potentially trigger Plunder or Gangplank. It's usually pretty easy for us to establish that. As long as our opponent has 2 units or fewer, it will guarantee trigger Plunder. And it's only 2 mana, so Nightfall is fairly easy to bank that much mana and still have the mana for our creatures. If, say, we go 1 drop, then no play turn 2, and then we go turn 3, Make It Rain, Crescent Guardian, for example, there's a lot of ways to have it set up our Nightfall creatures for us. Then finally, we have 1 copy of Hush, a 3-cost burst spell. Silence a unit this round, create a fleeting Hush in hand. Used effectively, this card is absurdly broken. It can be used to fog a turn, for example, by silencing our opponent's big buffed creatures so they don't do as much damage. And it can close out the game, essentially, by preventing stuff from blocking that might have otherwise been able to block, or reducing its health if it's buffed. It's a decent catch-all for things that Make It Rain misses. It establishes poor blocks or attacks for opponents by taking away their buffs or taking away their keywords like elusive or fearsome, for example. It's just a really good answer for things that our deck might have to answer or else lose. It's particularly good against, say, Nightfall, where their clock might be quicker than ours thanks to fearsome, where we might not be able to block it normally, but we can hush it. It can lose some of its Nightfall boosts, etc. It's just a card that's there to make sure we can keep the tempo in our favor. Now let's look at our flex spots. You can play around with the numbers, such as dropping a Dustbringer for a 3rd Warning Shot. You can shed a Guardian for a 3rd Grifter or a 2nd Hush. There's a number of things you can do like that. Another good thing you can do is drop a Shield Bearer and a Guardian, go down to 2 of both of those, so you can put 2 Citrus Couriers in. That's a 6-cost 4/5, and with Plunder, heal allies in Nexus 3, and Rally. It's life gain against other aggro decks if you're facing a lot of aggro decks, and it's even more attacks, so it can speed up our clocks because of Rally, and it's a solid body on its own. Basically, the big idea here, though, is that it guarantees us, or is much more likely to guarantee us, that we level up Misfortune that turn. Since even if we haven't found Navigator, or we were only able to get one extra attack in with Navigator, we can use this to get that next attack in for Misfortune to level up. It's a pretty strong card for the deck, and one I definitely would recommend if you're facing a lot of aggro matchups. Then you can always replace all 3 shield bearers with 3 black market merchants. The 2 cost 2/1. When you draw an enemy card, reduces cost by 1, plunder, nab 1. This is good against slower decks and combo decks since we want to go the long game, so drawing cards is very good for us, and taking cards from them can also be good for us. And it's not an overall bad card. The problem being it's pretty easy to kill and it's low power for its cost, but in some metas it's going to be your better choice than Shield Bearer. Then you could also drop 1 Shield Bearer for 1 copy of the Dreadway. The 9 cost 4/8 with Fearsome, play, draw a Gangplank, and double all damage by your skills, spells, and allies. It's a massive late game payoff that pulls GP, so we get multiple cards off of it, and it's a huge boost to overwhelm creatures or to attack triggers like Misfortune and Gangplank, which will now deal double. It's great against slow decks like control decks or mid-range decks where they're just going to try to hit these big creatures that just go above what our deck's capable of doing. The Dreadway gives us an answer to that. So if you're seeing a lot of that, putting in 1 or even 2 Dreadways into the deck could be a way to give yourself that late game that's so crazy that it can get past your opponent, or at least force that little bit of extra damage you need through. Then there's some things you could do with the spell package depending on the meta you're seeing. You could shave Make It Rain / Shield Bearer / Hush for 2 to 3 copies of Blessing of Targon, a 5 cost burst spell, grant an ally +3/+3. This could be great for really good combat tricks, much like Fury of the North it was in Tempo Sejuani decks. It can be great on overwhelmers like Gangplank or Crescent Guardian, or just on any creature that didn't get blocked. It can really close out a game out of nowhere. Or perhaps a better choice is to go with Pale Cascade instead, the 2 cost burst spell that gives an ally +2/+1 this round, and if you have Nightfall, it draws 1. These are both great ways to push your win, plus protect against damage-based removal / challengers. Blessing of Targon is better against challengers because of the fact that the buffs are permanent, but Pale Cascade is a lot easier to cast, a lot quicker, and potentially draws us a card if we've hit Nightfall, which is pretty easy for our deck to do. So that one's... They're both good cards, so you could take whichever one feels best to you. Otherwise, you could always drop the Hush for 1 Bastion, the 3 cost burst spell to give an ally spell shield this round. This is really good if you're seeing a lot of control decks. If you're seeing a lot of that where they're going to be using spells to kill your creatures, Bashing can be a great way to just make sure your Gangplank lives through that Ruination, for example, and closes out the game the next turn. So if that's what's giving you the most trouble, that can definitely be included in the deck. But all in all, that's mostly the flex spots for the deck. There's a couple of other things you could consider, but those are the big considerations for how you want to build your deck. And that's the deck for this episode. You can find the deck code in the description below if you want to take it for a spin yourself. Now let's jump into some ranked matches. Alright, game 1 here. Looks like some sort of Fizz deck. It's probably the Intrigue Fizz deck, but it's maybe running Twisted Fate. I've seen a couple of decks that try to get everything. Alright, so we have to pitch this Riptide Rex. I think I want to keep this Misfortune and Island Navigator. Like, this is super strong, and our opponent shouldn't have a good way of dealing with it. But it's very slow. Lunari's Shade Stalker could be super good, but without a way to trigger Nightfall. Alright, this might be greedy. We're gonna keep this. We're gonna keep this and just pitch the 1. Nope, that is definitely not what we were hoping for. Neither is that. Well, we were greedy.
Let me at him.
Ooh, and our opponent has the turn 1 Fizz. That is extraordinarily bad.
I'm ready.
And our deck is betraying us to an extreme right now.
Clad in shining sunlight.
He can't swing with Fizz now, so that's at least nice. Alright. We will play Misfortune.
I'm one of the good guys, but not that good.
Yeah, I think we attack. Alright. Use up one of his one clock. He's not clocking us that fast yet. Well, it's going to get out of control, though, fairly quickly. It's not awful. Alright, we're definitely looking to Island Navigator this turn. That still won't level Misfortune up, but it will be pretty close. Okay. Oh, is that just so he can get through? Yeah, that's fine. I mean, we're going low, that's for sure, but fortunately for us, we have a pretty fast follow-up. Oh, this is actually pretty decent. Okay, he's gonna draw a card, get mana, that's fine. We're actually going to pump this Unscarred Reaver by attacking that. And we're going straight to combat here.
This is our way.
Pull that here, pull that there. He's really thinking about whether he wants to try and save these narwhals. Oh, wow! Okay. Yeah, we're fine with that. Ironically, this is still going to get pumped, so it actually didn't do anything to that. So he definitely should have pumped Misfortune. Doesn't really make sense the way he did it, but... which one of these do we care more about? I guess Shieldbreaker. Shieldbreaker is better than Soldier here. And we'll play Shadestalker because having Elusive would be pretty convenient here. Do we actually play Soldier anyways? You know, I think we do.
We will not suffer unbelievers.
They will not escape punishment.
Okay, so
The Scar
we'll
Maidens
attack
will
like
know
that.
my name.
Attack like that.
For truth.
We'll attack like this and like this.
Battle.
So we'll grab that. Actually, do we trade her off, maybe? Nah, we'll do this. We'll do this. It's time to go for the extra damage, but it's not really worth
Love
it.
ya.
Yeah, and her punch is gonna pass, or take the damage. That makes sense, I suppose. Right, Misfortune's pretty close to leveling. We got an elusive blocker for the Fizz. We're in pretty decent shape.
Can't say no to Fizz.
Yeah, I guess it doesn't really make sense to,
Through the coral.
Okay.
Fear not.
We will definitely block. I don't even care if we lose Shadestalker. We don't actually need her. We just need to not take damage. Because we are getting to a pretty low health total. So I'm definitely fine if he pumps and we lose this Shadestalker. That's actually not really relevant to what we are going for here. Question is whether we blast with a Gangplank. I think we do. Yeah, see, this is fine. Because then we don't even trade. So we're going to attack with our scouts then. Level up Misfortune. Yeah, our opponent's in a pretty bad spot here.
No regrets, no mercy.
I'm going to take a big dab. Warning shot Citrus Courier, maybe? Is that enough to level up Twisted Fate? Because that's what he really needs. That's enough to level up Twisted Fate. Does Twisted Fate do enough for him, though? He's got to cast 2 more things to get the crit card, and that will do a little bit, but it still doesn't even do that much. Especially not when we have... Yeah, okay. So he's got to cast 3 spells so we can stun our Misfortune. Now, do we just go to combat? I think we probably do.
Scorching
Oh yeah, we definitely do. Yeah, our opponent should be dead here. Because then, even if somehow he takes no damage this turn, so he casts spell, red card, kill these two, then casts another spell, which stuns Misfortune, then like Frostbite there, maybe block here, and he takes only this Misfortune trigger, we still kill him with Warning Shot.
You'll be sorry.
So, yeah, our opponent should be dead here, no matter what happens.
You can't do this.
Yeah, it would be really weird if you traded a Fizz in like that. Nope, and there we go. Yep. Opponent didn't really have an answer for that one.
That's how we do things in Bilgewater.
Okay. The Darius Thresh deck. Interesting. Interesting. Sort of undead dunks. I think we want to kind of go quick here, but we're also... It's not necessarily that bad. Decisions. Do we keep the Island Navigator? We pitch this Grifter. I'm not a huge fan of the Crescent Guardian. It's kind of mediocre, but with a Duskbringer in hand, I'm more tempted to keep it. I think we're going to go like this. Alright, that's not bad. That's not bad at all. They're still going to lead on this Duskbringer. Alright. Let's see what we got. Alright, we're gonna play it out.
Ours is the one true
We're just gonna play this Jagged Butcher with no benefit. See what our opponent does. I'm kind of expecting like Vile Feast. Okay. That's yeah. That makes me more tempted now to play the Jagged Butcher afterwards. So it gets +1/+1. Yeah. We're gonna go like this. I don't think our opponent's gonna block, yeah. Takes full damage. We'll play Butcher. Now we have another thing that can block Miswraiths. And it can actually block without dying next turn. Unless our opponent summons another Miswraith. Ooh, Hush is actually pretty good in this matchup. I think we're willing to take that. Now, do we play Crescent Guardian or do we play MF? I think we play MF.
Favors the bold.
And we'll Crescent Guardian next turn by doing Dust Petal Guardian. Ooh, or we'll just play that.
Night flowers upon my blade.
Actually, no benefit to using these Dust Petal Dusts. Okay, and we'll play Crescent Guardian. I suppose there was some argument for leaving up Make It Rain, because Make It Rain would kill all of these. Yeah, we're not worried about that blocking. Okay, we'll swing like this. And I think we can actually risk attacking with Butcher. Puts our opponent to 3. Well, he's actually going to trade a Miswraith then. That's a little surprising. He's not going to block with a Spider. I mean, it would save him health. So it's a little interesting that he won't. And he took out the fearsome blockers that aren't MF, so that makes sense. We have this Hush though, so we're not actually that worried. Ooh, double Make It Rain. Okay, that's fine. I mean, we will happily double Make It Rain, because that should sweep the Miswraith. Let's see what our opponent gets. Yeah, we'll go like that. Kill the Spider, kill the Miswraith, deal some damage to our opponent.
Never stop shooting.
And see what he does. We're in a decent position to do a lot of damage next turn. Doobies. Okay. That's good for him. He did need that life gain.
Lunari,
Yeah, I guess we just swing like this. gonna play it a little bit slower, but I think we have to. Alright, we'll play Jagged Butcher. Right now, we're just looking for one of our big payoffs. Gangplank would be great. Island Navigator would be great. Because then if he doesn't have an answer for Misfortune, we just level her up. Interesting. Yeah, we're fine with that. That's not something we're overly worried about. I mean, that is a bit scary. Or it would be a bit scary. But unfortunately for our opponent, it's not actually that scary. We can do 3 of these. Yeah, our opponent's in for an unfortunate surprise, I think. Although I suppose if we hush, he's going to lose, or it's going to lose ephemeral, so anything we hush we have to kill. So that has us to 8. How do we want to do this? Hush here. Block there.
You cannot hold us down.
Go to 5. Hush there. Block it. Go to 0. Block something else? Or do we just hush that, maybe? Yeah, I guess we just do that. And this leaves him with 1 blocker, which is a misrate. That has no buffs. Alright, what do we draw off the top? We gotta go for that. Oh, we got Ephemeral back? That's funny. That's good to know. Problem being, if he has Atrocity. Because if he has Atrocity, we would just lose. That we're not worried about.
Blessed is motion.
We'd be okay with that. Does he have Atrocity? No. Does not. I mean, that is fine.
Love you.
Okay, what does he get back? That is lucky for him, but I think we still have it. Yeah, that should be lethal. Yep, there we go. Alright. Well, that worked out fairly well.
Fortune smiles.
Alright, game number 3 here. Looks like it's going to be against Spider Aggro. I've seen a lot of this lately, so it must be getting under the Aurelian Soul decks, and that must be why everyone's playing it. Because I've seen this deck quite a lot today. This is a pretty excellent hand. I think we're actually going to keep it. Yeah, I think we're going to keep this. So, thinking about plays, it's tempting to go Warning Shot, Jagged Butcher for 4 this turn. Definitely not now.
Raise your weapon, Sunwood.
Because depending on what our opponent does, next turn we can go Warning Shot, Jagged Butcher to block Elise. Or if he doesn't play Elise, we can go Warning Shot, Shadestalker to have a flyer. And this is still 3 damage on turn 1, so we miss out on 1 point of damage, but that doesn't really matter because the Warning Shot will get us that damage eventually. And by using Warning Shot next turn, that gets us closer to Gangplank level up too, so this is definitely the best play. It was a little more debatable when we didn't have the Shadestalker, so that it was just like turn 2 Jagged Butcher. Well, let's see what our opponent has, or does not have. Arachnid Horror, how do we feel about that? That I'm fine with. We'll just Warning Shot, Shade Stalker. And then take our 3.
Invisible to the ignorant.
And then next turn we'll just run out this Misfortune and swing. This Petty Officer could be pretty good for blocking Arachnid Horrors and other fearsome units. So if our opponent's pretty heavy on that, we can play around that pretty well with Petty Officer.
It found you.
Ooh, Gangplank is, yep, that's the late game payoff we're really looking for.
If they don't break, they'll burn.
That's an interesting play.
You for the many.
Well, it can't block now.
For truth.
I don't think we swing with Misfortune here, though. I don't think we want to lose her. Although it is... yeah, no. No, we don't swing with her. Ooh, our opponent's not even going to block anyways. Well, we're putting them on a fast clock, then. Warning Shot off the top here would be insane. What? That's great. That right there is great. Because this gets our Gangplank to 4 or 5 right now, then we play him on turn 5, and we swing, and if he doesn't have an answer for Gangplank, like, yeah, things go bad for our opponent real quick here. Do we want a random 1 cost, or do we want a Powder Keg? I think we're on the 1 cost. That's a pretty decent 1 cost. Alright. And we'll play this Jagged Butcher. We're gonna block one of these. We might even block multiple things. Oh, okay, yep. Yep. Oh my lord. Well, that's scary. Okay, let's think about this. And what we have to do here. So we have to block here, we have to block here. What does that put us to? That puts us to 2. That's not great.
Just leave me alone!
Block there. Do we have to trade this Misfortune in? I don't think so. I don't think we have to. That was messy, though. That's for sure. That was messy. Alright, well, we're gonna play this Gangplank.
When we're done, I'm taking your head.
Don't make promises you can't keep, little girl. Fuse is lit!
Okay.
Whatever the cost.
Not sure where this puts our opponent.
Routes closed. Your path ends here.
I think he's probably in a bad spot if he doesn't have, yeah, an answer to this keg. Well, he got lucky.
Love ya.
Unfortunate, but it's an aggro deck, so it does happen. That's the first time I've lost that matchup, though, so... Oh, he had the crazy turn 4. That was actually insane. I've never seen a Nightfall deck pull that off. So, good for our opponent, I guess. Alright, game 4 here. I'm gonna guess that this is Dragons. Demacia Aurelian Soul usually means dragons, but with the Leona, there's a good chance he's got a little bit of aggro there too. I think I'm going to keep Hush. Hush is good against dragons. We'll keep this Butcher for turn 1 and Petty Officer, so... Ooh, Riptide Rex could be good, but that's about a million years away. Fleet Feather would have been awful for us there, so... Thankfully our opponent did not have that. Well, at least we get to bank a Make It Rain. Yeah, I do not like where we're at right now. I definitely do not like where we're at. Well, he didn't have star shaping at least. Well, that's actually not a bad find. Know your path. The mountain changes. what do we want to do here? I guess we... Do we make it rain Shade Stalker, or do we Petty Officer? Guess we'll Petty Officer. Yeah, I guess one cost. Yeah, one's fine. Yeah, bank the mana, I guess. We'll play that.
My faith protects me.
Daylight star will rule the skies.
Okay, so we need to have Hush here for the Lifestealer. I guess this Shade Stalker is not worth as much now. Okay, so we'll swing with all the 3s, swing with the 2s, swing with the 1s. Let's see how he blocks. That's a weird choice in block, but we're okay with that. Okay. Kinda sucks, but he's still not gonna gain life. Yeah, we're okay with that outcome. Now, the real question is what kind of dragons come down for our opponent.
I will find
Because this Riptide Rex could be a pretty good closeout for us, but it is about 1,000,000 years off.
I know these paths well.
I guess we'll play Soldier into Shade Stalker. Hopefully he doesn't hit the lifelinker again.
darkness hides.
And hopefully he doesn't have too much life gain. That's the big thing we're worried about here. Yeah, we're just gonna swing.
Whatever the cost.
And we're gonna hold this make it rain because we're hoping that it yeah, we're hoping that it triggers our Riptide Rex. And I think if I make it rain right now, he's not dead. Right? Yeah, he's not dead. So there's almost no reason to use that. We're just gonna hope that we can get make it rain. Well, that is super unfortunate.
Strike for justice.
I mean, that's not the worst. Do we want to block this? I'm just gonna take 5 triggers to kill it right now. Yeah, that's not ideal.
Not sway me.
Whereas that's gonna take 3 triggers. Oh wait, I should have make it rained right there. That was a mistake. No, we still get the guaranteed trigger here. See what he's got.
Not yet. Good to go.
Single combat, concerted strike. He could play another Radiant Guardian. That would suck. Especially since I think he does have a combat spell. Okay. That's not really scary. The question is, can I play this MF? Yeah.
Fortune favors the bold.
See what our opponent has. At least he can't get a Radiant Guardian this turn with lifelink. But he has, what, one Celestial card unaccounted for? And that would be it. Alright, well this is lethal in the air.
Unseen.
Let's see what our opponent has. Lethal in the air, lethal on the ground. Not a lot he could have for 3 mana. Yep, and there we go. I guess that was more Celestials than Dragons, but either way, good result for us. Alright, Big money, no whammies, game 5, and this looks like it's going to be Ender tokens, would be my guess. Just using probably a little more Nightfall creatures, and then the Nocturne is just the late game payoff, I guess. How do I feel about Make It Rain? I'm not sure how I feel about that. We're attacking turn 1. Alright, we're gonna pitch this Duskbringer since we don't have any Nightfall creatures. We're gonna keep it Make It Rain in case they go like bird, bird, bird. And then we have Soldier for turn 1, Shield Bearer turn 2, or just Bank Mana turn 2. We'll see.
Is the one true light.
This is a pretty strong turn 1 against this kind of deck. Yeah, because he can block, but then we don't lose anything out of it. Yeah, so he won't block. And depending on what he plays next turn, we can always Make It Rain to kill his Omen Hawk and deal damage to him. Yep, that's one of the better things we could see. Now we deal damage to him and kill both. What's he got now? The next question is, what do we do next turn? Do we just swing right away, or do we play a creature? I guess we play Shield Bearer. Ah, he did have another Bark Beast. Interesting. I had a feeling he might. Yeah, we'll play Shield Bearer.
Unyielding light.
What's he got? Haunted Relic. Alright, that kind of sucks. Yeah, I guess we swing with the Shield Bearer, because why not? Not that it accomplishes much, but... Our opponent hasn't been up to anything too crazy yet, so that at least is good for us. Warning Shot's not bad. Though I guess Warning Shot we'd rather keep for the Riptide, so we'll Make It Rain, probably. Make It Rain, trade with Soldier if he presents it. Opponent's really thinking about it, though. They're probably less likely to play Neverglade, was that Neverglade Elder or whatever, the thing that heals. They're probably less likely to play that now. They're probably more likely to run Doom Beast in that slot. Alright, get a little more damage through. A little closer to our Gangplank. We'll probably play Gangplank next turn. I don't think we're really incentivized to not. Okay, Callista's not concerning. Especially since he probably won't attack with her this turn, but if he does, we will absolutely take that trade. Yeah, I didn't think he would. Alright, we'll go Gangplank. See what our opponent does. I think we just go for it. See how he wants to do this. The only way Gangplank dies is if he loses Callista, which I had a feeling he probably would not want to go for. And that doesn't level up Callista either, so that's also good. Really? He does take more damage that way, but if he has another Callista in hand, then he can kill Gangplank. Although if he does spend 3 mana on that, we're actually kind of okay with that. I mean, it sucks for sure, but we're already getting our value out of this Gangplank, essentially. He's now guaranteed that Warning Shot does extra damage, for example. Okay. That's not scary. That's just Follower, right? So he can't pull a Callista off that and kill us with it, so that's good. I'm assuming he has... Oh, I guess not. That's crazy. So we're going to level up this Gangplank next turn. I'm pretty sure we're just going to Warning Shot the gang. Like, level up Gangplank. Yeah. Yeah, no, 100%. Then we get to play both of these with Nightfall. Yeah. We're just going to level up Gangplank here.
I'll spot him. I'll take my time. I am reborn of salt and brine!
Makes it slightly harder for our opponent to deal with it in case they're on Bladed Caretaker. That's also the reason we're going to play this Shade Stalker first. In case he goes Caretaker, then we know not to play Crescent Guardian. Although I suppose we probably do still run it out. Alright, yep, that's a scary bird. But we are pretty far ahead now. And we know that he hit Avaros and Sentry. Ah, there's the Bladed Caretaker. Yeah, I mean this is definitely sketchy. Our opponent got a pretty good turn here, but I'm not sure it's enough. What's he pulling? Oh, is he just going for kills? Do we have to block stuff? That's the better question. I mean, I suppose we're fine blocking Sentry or Bladed Caretaker. If we don't block these, I'm trying to think how much damage we'll even take. I don't think it's a ton, though. 14? 14 is a fair amount, but... Okay. Drops us to 6. We don't want to go to 6 because we want to be able to kill our opponent next turn without them atrocitying.
Light the signal fires!
Gangplank's gonna create a barrel, which is good for us.
Barrel!
Alright, well let's see what our opponent has. Because we're putting up quite the threat here. What Nightfall thing does he have? Pale Cascade, maybe? I don't know that that's enough, though. Because this does do a fair amount of damage.
No, 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 no!
That does nothing. Yep. I think... Did we get there? Did we get there? Grasp of the Undying? Oh! Alright! And there we go. That's a 4-1 record. Not bad, not bad. We will absolutely take those. Alright, so to review, we went 4-1 in our matchups, which is a pretty good record. And in fact, the one game we lost is really funny, is that it's actually a pretty favorable matchup for me, for the deck. And in fact, I've actually gone a total of 21-8 with this deck in ranked so far at this point. So I can say pretty comfortably that Spiders is actually a pretty good matchup. It's just our opponent had that one crazy turn 4 where they had the 4 birds, which that was just too much to deal with. But in pretty much any other circumstance, we should be faster than that deck. In fact, let me do some real quick math here. I think I'm 2-1 against the deck, 3-1 against the deck against Spider Aggro. Yeah, we usually are just a little bit faster than them, plus Misfortune lines up really, really well against their deck. The big problem, and what wasn't even showcased in these matches, is that I've actually gone like 1-2, 1-3 against Nightfall aggro, so that's easily one of the worst matchups for the deck. But then to look at some of the other ones we went against, the Bilgewater Freljord Fizz deck is kind of more of a meme than anything else, I think. It combos and does this combo pretty well, but as you saw, we kind of just ran them down. They weren't even really that close to beating us at any point there. We were getting a little bit low in health, but we built a massive board presence since they weren't really doing anything to control it, because their regions are pretty weak for that. So that matchup's probably going to be pretty good for most decks. The Darius Thresh Harrowing deck, we kind of crushed that deck pretty well, even though it had a really early Harrowing with a lot of creatures that got back. We did have our one of Hush, so that was good for us, but there was a reason we kept it, and that was the big reason we wanted that card and wanted to keep it and leave the mana open for it. It was a little dicey, a little sketchy, but worked in the end, so that was I think we should probably be favorable in most matchups, because that was most games against that deck, because that was pretty much as good as they could have asked for, since they got multiple miss race out, and then they died, and they were able to bring it back with a super early on-curve Harrowing. So I think that was pretty much the nuts for their deck, and it still wasn't good enough against us. So I think that matchup should be pretty good for us. I found Endure to be pretty good for us too. We saw the one matchup, except they were running Nocturne instead of Elise, but I've done really well against that deck. The only time I've lost, in fact, was when they were running Callista Trundle, which was really weird. But Trundle was pretty hard for the deck to deal with, which can kind of be true in general, but most Trundle decks were not too bad against, because we're incredibly fast, so a lot of the Trundle decks don't really build a wide board, but the Endure version would, so that was the big problem we faced with that matchup. And in fact, I've played a handful of games against the Trundle ramp deck, and it's done pretty well since we're very fast. We get under pretty quickly. I've played against the Leona Aurelion Soul Celestial deck a couple of times. We've won every time. The deck's actually beaten Support a couple of times, though I haven't played it that much lately. It seems like it's kind of fallen off today, at least. Yeah, I just like with this deck is you kind of get the best of both Bilgewater and Targon for aggro. We get the 1-mana 3/3s. We get all 6 of them with Jagged Butcher and Solarian Soldier. Misfortune really comes in quite big in this deck, as we saw a number of times, and then Gangplank is just a great finisher for the deck, especially if we can level him up and even get a couple of swings in with him, because as he builds more barrels every turn, we could get a pretty massive Gangplank attack trigger if our opponent can't deal with him, and since he has 5 to 6 health, it's usually pretty hard for our opponent to deal with it. It was doing even better before these games, where we faced a lot of aggressive decks, where we couldn't build a crazy board presence, but against slow decks like the Trundle Ramp deck, we go so wide and with such large creatures that our opponents usually have a very hard time dealing with it. More problematic decks are stuff like Ash Sejuani is very hard for us, because they can often block and eat our units or trade pretty effectively for them. Reckoning is really good against us, so that deck's a little bit scary. If we can dodge the Reckoning, it shouldn't be too bad, but it's a bit scary. All in all, though, I like this aggro deck in a way better than Nightfall, because I find our late game to be a little bit better. Unless you, if you have the Nocturne, it's really good for Nightfall, but it's pretty easy to be out aggroed when you're playing Nightfall aggro, so I'd been looking for a deck that was going to basically just get the best of both worlds and just have really, really well-costed creatures and be extremely aggressive, so it would get under a lot of the Trundle Aurelion Soul ramp decks we were seeing at the time, as well as some Dragon decks, etc. So that's basically where I came to making this deck, and I included the Riptide Rex for just the great late-game payoffs that you can get off that. I'm thinking about changing a couple things in the deck myself, so just a couple of things you could consider as well. I mentioned these in the flex spots, but I'm going to go into a little more depth on why I'm thinking about doing this. Is that it seems like the meta is switching to more aggressive units, so I'm considering maybe dropping one of the shield bearers, for example, and picking up maybe a Citrus Courier, maybe trying to drop another thing, maybe one of the Riptide Rex to get another Citrus Courier for the heal, but also so I can level up Misfortune even easier, because if you don't have the Island Navigator, you can still get 2 attacks in 1 turn using Citrus Courier. So I think I might try that route myself going forward, if it's going to be a lot more aggro like we saw today. But all in all, I think the deck's pretty strong. I think Bilgewater has a lot of value cards in it, which works really well for us and can get past or be a little more aggressive and sticky than some of the Nightfall late game threats. So I think this is a great deck if you're looking for something that's going to give you fast games and some really, really powerful cards while just being extremely aggressive and setting up poor trades for your opponent. Thanks for watching the video. If you enjoyed the video, leave a like, comment below, and subscribe for more videos just like it.